welcome to a rare and insightful journey through time in China. For decades, the world's knowledge of China has been shaped by Western narratives tainted by prejudice, disinformation, propaganda, and demonization. But today, we delve into a unique collection of documentary footage from the United States, revealing a rare time when America chose to tell the truth about China. This two-part series transports us back to the era of World War II in 1938 and 1944, respectively, a period marked by global upheaval and shifting alliances. On one hand, China has been fighting for its survival by resisting Japanese aggression and invasion since 1931, with the invasion of Manchuria and further escalation that sparked the Second Sino-Japanese War on July 7, 1937, which marked the beginning of World War II in Asia. And on the other hand, the US recognized the strategic importance of China's resistance and could serve as a counter to Japan's aggressive expansionism, which may eventually be a threat to US economic interests in China and its imperial regional influence. In addition, the US government, led by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, faced the challenge of preparing the American public for entering the war in Europe, when public opinion strongly favored non-intervention and opposed involvement in foreign conflicts. Despite that, the United States Congress passed the Lend-Lease Act, authorizing the provision of military aid to China in March 1941, 9 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor, while the Chinese Exclusion Act was still in effect. For historical context, in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the United States and Japan, along with other Western powers, engaged in imperialist expansionism in China. This period witnessed countless wars, the imposition of unequal treaties, genocide, the division of China into spheres of influence, the exploitation of its vast resources, and the great transfer of wealth. These imperialist powers later formed the so-called Eight-Nation Alliance in attempts to further colonize China through invasion, threats of war, drug trade, unequal treaties, and ceded territories. As a result, China was weakened greatly as a country and suffered major internal fragmentation through a century of humiliation. Chinese resentment towards foreign powers grew, leading to the rise of bipartisan unity and resistance movements. For the first time, and in a way never seen before, these two black-and-white documentaries are being brought back to life in full through the magic of artificial intelligence. Imagine the grainy, monochrome images and the grayscale world transformed into a symphony of colors, breathing new life into long-lost moments. Accompanying the colorized visuals is our improved, captivating soundtrack, which carefully preserves and integrates elements of the original music and sound effects, paying homage to the documentary's historical context, while simultaneously elevating the viewing experience. So please enjoy the journey, and we will talk again towards the end of the documentary.
Chinese city, 500 miles from the front. In the city of Shanghai, 20,000 killed. Nanking in ruins, 10,000 dead. Hankow, 15,000. Canton, 20,000. All civilians, not one soldier. 150,000 dead. Becomes your enemy. The walls of your own home become a death trap. They leave the captured cities and move toward the west. They are going toward the interior, men, women, and animals. Toward the west, toward the old land, the interior of China. Here are the graves of the old kings, lying silent under the fields of wheat. On this earth lived generations of men. They invented the iron plow and paper made of the fibers of rice. They wrote poems and erected beautiful cities, and China was the flower of the world. Out of the mountain stone, men carved out lions to stand above the sacred graves. The great lions of China, looking in the four directions of the wind. There were wise men that spoke in those days: Confucius, Lao-tzu, scholars, artists who could paint the wind, and emperors taller than any man, and stone eyes that see forever. Toward the land of China, there was a single road from the west. Marco Polo came by this route from Italy, and he returned with his camels loaded with tea, jewels, gunpowder, medicines, carvings of precious jade, paintings made on silk, and handfuls of rice. He described the fertile rivers and the towers that he saw in every village, called pagodas, that were built to ward off famine and pestilence and war. Always millions of quiet men turning the earth over and over. Wheat in the northwest, rice in the rich waters of the south. The two rivers, the Yellow and the Yangtze, long generations of hard work, the earth, the wind, and the water, the enormous, the living China. Yellow storm, dust carried by northern winds. The Great Wall sinks down under the dust. China sinks down. She is robbed by Japan and by the Western powers without resistance. China begins to shake off the dust of the last century. A new voice arises out of the movement of the people. Dr. Sun Yat-sen. In his room at this desk, he worked out the ideas which would regain China's independence and freedom. At his death in 1924, he became a national hero. 1911, Sun Yat-sen explaining his three great principles. He himself realized it would be many years before his ideals found root among the people, years of quarreling and even civil war. The citizens of China began by ending the misrule of an emperor. Then they took another step toward democracy, learning to read. The sign says, "This school is built in the name of Sun Yat-sen." In these schools, a new generation was being trained. Young China learned to cope with science, medicine, economics. Co-eds on the campus, just as in America. Engineers and bridge builders, linking up towns and cities. The Western Mountains were another hindrance to the development of China. They broke through this barrier to permit commerce with the nations further west, with Russia, Turkestan, Mongolia. The road was built into the northwest. 2,000 miles long. Fortunately, they constructed it well. Today it is their lifeline, along which supply trucks can speed into the heart of China. There was a time when there was little need of roads. Each village could support itself from the land which surrounded it. But when modern cities arose, the ancient trails were no longer enough. They had to build long, hard-surface highways, 13,000 miles in every province of China. Irrigation is an old Chinese art, for the dry soil of China had always to be softened with water. A new type, Chinese engineer. Sound is heard in far provinces. Locomotives rushing through the night. 9,000 miles of steel rails. Airplanes roaring over fields and mountains in great curves. Thus China begins to change herself into a modern nation. Steel, coal, cotton. This growth of independent Chinese industry provoked alarm across the Yellow Sea. Here a clique of warlords ruled 60 million Japanese. The people living on this cluster of islands were no different than the Chinese. They had the same desires as the Chinese: food, work, peace. But their rulers had different plans. Formosa, 1895. The beginning of Japan's divine mission. Step by step, China, the Philippines next, the Soviet Union, California, perhaps the whole world. Korea, 1910. In Japan, more guns, more shells, more taxes. Manchuria seized in 1931. Arms piling up in Japan. Planes, bombs. Listen to the generals meeting in Tokyo.
This is the hour to advance before the Chinese grow too strong The Emperor has given his divine approval. The Navy and Army with invincible force will capture the coastal cities. The radio will explain everything to the foreigners. If the Chinese cowards resist, we blow up their cities. Long live the Imperial Army. Long live
ZJ, Radio Tokyo calling. Radio Tokyo calling. Good evening, friends in America. Once again, we bring you our daily news broadcast. We have received many polite letters from America asking why our divine emperor sends our soldiers and sailors to visit in China. The reply is simple. Our cruisers are steaming up the Yangtze River on a mission of peace. The Chinese women welcomed our Japanese army with flowers, many beautiful flowers.
No, this isn't Tokyo or some port in Italy or Germany. It's San Francisco. This iron will fall on a Chinese city. The United States ships 54% of war materials that go to Japan. Scrap iron, broken machinery are melted down in Tokyo, and those shells will go into Japanese guns.
Enough! We Chinese never wanted war. We still want peace. We must learn to resist.
The Japanese generals have taken enough. Their warships are on our rivers. They rob our factories, our crops. They kill everyone. Will there never be an end?
Yes, it is true. We must endure the years of a hard war. That's why we must forget our old differences. Why should we fight one another? We must defend ourselves against aggression. We must unite. Then we can win.
The flag of the Chinese Republic. One-fifth of mankind under one flag. Actors leave their theaters and play on the street corners. They instruct the audience how to resist the enemy. The campaign to raise money touches every man, woman, and child in the country. The money will buy food, guns, hospitals. It's a fine thing to have your name written down in this book of contributions.
打倒最后一人来保卫国土，请大家捐钱帮助前线战士把日本帝国主义打出中国去，建立独立的新中国。
伤害我们的儿童，伤害我们的儿童！哇，年轻的中国空军是儿童的英雄！哇，伟大的中国空军是解放儿童的英雄！哇，年轻的中国空军是为世界儿童的英雄！
In the old days, people said, "Do not use good iron for nails, or good sons for soldiers." In these times, the best sons become soldiers. The tomb of China's unknown soldier is dedicated. He died in defense of Shanghai. He has no name. His name is Courage, freedom. Here is Ko Mai-yo, famous poet and historian. This is the Chief of Staff of the Chinese Army, General Chen Cheng. They salute the Washington of their republic, Sun Yat-sen. They salute this unknown son of their republic. Madam Chiang Kai-shek, the most famous woman in her country. She organizes the women for defense. There's money to be raised, nurses to be trained, refugees to be fed and housed, and this committee must guide thousands of other committees throughout China.
决心尽自己一切的力量来参加祖国的抗战。我们的新的口号是一切的人力物力都贡献给我们的祖国。我以为我们妇女应该做的事情是很多的，譬如捐款呢，援助前线的将士，加紧生产呢，救济难民，救济孤儿等等。诸位有什么意见，请随便发表。
This bank draft has come 6,000 miles. A foreign flag invades New York, but look, money is thrown on the flag. Americans still believe in the rights of the people, in New York or in China. And the flag comes home again, with money to buy rice for the orphans of this tragic war. Months ago, their parents were killed or lost somewhere along the road. There are thousands of such children in China. Here is the youth, facing a difficult future, marching under the banners of Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek. The spirit of the nation is typified by this brave woman, the widow of Dr. Sun Yat-sen. the nation grows stronger. The people see clearly that to defeat Japan, they must not only have the spirit and the will to resist, but also guns and soldiers. Out of the People's Movement grows the National People's Council. For the first time, the delegates meet. General Chiang Kai-shek, the Christian general, Dr. Kung, Minister of Finance, delegates from the far northwest. Before the meetings, they repeat the three principles of Sun Yat-sen, namely, national independence, freedom and democracy, and the well-being of the people. This People's Council strengthens the government. The Executive Cabinet meets. The Minister of Foreign Affairs reports on the possibility of loans from America and England. The Minister of War reports. The invasion blockades the seacoast. China must have more extensive roads. Hard roads need good footwear, and this is manufactured in home industries which are set up in the interior. In this way, the people of the most distant villages are involved in the defense of China. The equipment improves, and the training of soldiers improves. These recruits never saw a map before. Up to now, they knew only their own village. There were fields around it, and that was all. Black lines indicate armies already in the field. Follow a line to the northwest, and you come to the 8th Route Army. Here, the leaders of the Special Administrative District hold a military conference. The 8th Route Army, formerly the Chinese Red Army, has been incorporated into the national forces which are fighting the Japanese. It is especially in this northwest region that they employ the new guerrilla tactics. Quick attacks, quick retreats, cutting the enemy's railroads and communication lines, cutting off their supplies, attacking suddenly from the rear.
同意团结全民众，力求进步与依靠民众，这样来克服困难，争取胜利。
经验告诉我们，消极的防御是战争中一个刹车。当着敌人不备，我们必要进攻敌人；当着敌人来犯，我们要避免他的主力。现在我们的部队在敌人后方，亦与各方互相联络。他们要利用。
The man who leads the 8th Route Army is Chu Tei. He is a general whose headquarters are on the field of battle. Millions of Chinese farmers are behind these enemy lines. They are being armed for surprise attacks, for guerrilla warfare. This military post can call on thousands of volunteers from the fields. Tell all volunteers to meet on the highway near the Sinkyong River. Soon they will all have rifles. Recruits come in by tens of thousands. Mohammedans, Mongolians, Cantonese. Boys from the rice fields, men from the cold northwest. Recruits must be taught to be good soldiers. Every life counts now. The old shadow dance is converted into a setting up exercise. Now the soldiers have modern rifles. Soldiers must be taught to use these new war machines. They look like football players, but this is a game for the life of their country. Know what they are fighting for, not for the glory of a little group of warlords, as do the Japanese. They prepare to fight a war of defense. Defense for their rivers, their harvests, and their own families. China gets back her sky. The nerve center of armed China is this National Military Council. It has placed all the armies in the field under a united command at last. The chief responsibility rests on the Commander-in-Chief, General Chiang Kai-shek. The new strategy of defense is worked out. China will reserve her heavy equipment for decisive blows. Japan wants to win the war with one glorious battle. But China harasses her with 1,000 small engagements, knowing that every Japanese advance brings China closer to its ultimate victory. The invaders had already seized the cities of the coast. While China's defense was being organized, the Japanese advanced deep into Shanxi, Hunan, Guangdong, and along the Yangtze River to Hankow. The Chinese strategy is to avoid major battles, but to block the ends of the enemy advance. Behind the Japanese, small groups of armed peasants cut the lines and then go back into hiding. The Japanese lines of communication are cut again. Japanese munition trains are lost. Bridges disappear. Outposts of Japanese troops are cut off. That is guerrilla warfare. The Japanese control the railroads and the cities, but little else. The banks of the Yellow River are too vast to be wholly occupied by the enemy. This place is one of the vulnerable points of the Japanese lines. A fisherman prepares his goatskin raft. Then regular soldiers, operating by guerrilla methods, emerge from a neighboring village. Meanwhile, a critical situation developed around the town of Taichuang. The Japanese had advanced too fast. The Chinese proposed to surround them. The story of Taichuang was told by an officer from the 91st Division. Sergeant Wang, a brave, courteous man, he told what happened and how they fought, sometimes in the heat of the afternoon, sometimes at night. Wang knew how many were wounded and some of their names and what provinces they had traveled from. It was our victory, he said, a hard victory. Our guns were covered with dust. It was very early in the morning. We felt strong. We were going to attack. I myself, said Wang, come from Guangxi, where we plant our rice in the mud. Here in the north, they grow millet. The dust blows everywhere. The sun is often cold, yet this is also my country. We kept marching toward the north, and people told us, be careful, the enemy is not far away, because here the villages were bombed and there was no more grain. A Japanese captain forced these people to carry ammunition, but then he had to retreat. This peasant told me about it. The captain ordered the people to gather on a road and threw a thing with a tail like a fish. This man escaped the explosion with a wound in the muscle of his neck. After 3 hours, we came to the village of Chisin. We heard that the Japanese were retreating. That was true, for I saw the dead in the village. There was nothing left alive. Where they cannot conquer, they kill. That is their custom. Once this town held 2,000 families. But the Japanese battalions were gone, and the bravest people were coming back. Li Po was the first man. He brought his family with him. first thing he did was look for his good stone hammer, but his wife searched for the grinding stones, hoping they were not broken by the bombs. While we were marching near the canal, the Japanese tried to find our route. When we lie down, we cast no shadow, and from the sky we're invisible, the same color as the dust. We had men with us from the Big Sword Battalion and also many machine guns. We were a good division, all young men, and we had officers who had fought the Japanese before. Field headquarters were set up near a barn. The plan of attack was to pretend to strike at the front, but to hit hardest at the sides. General Sun directed us. He was a tireless man, placed in command here because he loved to attack. He was an old-time general, a fighter all his life. He ordered emplacements of the light artillery. The rangefinder was wrapped in cloth so it would not shine back toward the enemy. Battery number 7 reporting by field telephone. Correction for battery number 7. Increase range to 2,000 yards. I think, said Sergeant Wong, we're learning to talk back to the Emperor of Japan. From the north, the wounded were returning. It is 40 miles to the base hospital. While we advanced in front, daring men climbed the stone hills near the mountain of the sacred tree. They went around the back of the mountain. They planned to surprise the Japanese from behind. Our scouts watched from the mountain, very quiet. The Japanese patrol on the road, along the Japanese line of communication. They saw our men, but it was too late. While this was happening, we advanced along the Grand Canal into the edge of the town. It was quiet now, not much firing except far off at the right. A machine gun nest at our flank. It was left there to protect the enemy retreat. We took cover in the trenches used last night by the 31st Division. A squad of our men blew up the enemy nest. The way was clear. The division in front of us had occupied Taya Shuang during the night. I saw the flag on the walls. We had taken back Taya Shuang. We captured 9 Japanese tanks. Near sunset, we fortified the gate against counterattack. Taya Chuang was ours. That was our victory, said Sergeant Wong. We buried the dead and rested in that city. When the Japanese General Staff learned of their loss at Taya Chuang, they struck back. They took revenge for their defeat. They bombed the open cities of China. They bombed the unarmed population. These are not easy things to look at, but as Americans, we had to see them. We saw the building, the destruction, the suffering, and the hope of victory. Taya Chuang is taken. The Chinese will march all night in the streets to celebrate their first victory. Here is a great people, 1/5 of the human race, fighting in defense of their freedom, their fine culture, their independence, against the pitiless attack of undeclared war. Will these people win? They believe they can. They say it may take them 10 years or more, and they fully realize the suffering they will have to endure. But they have weapons to fight with, and they understand why they are fighting. In the end, those are the things that mean victory.
The harrowing tale of World War II is incomplete without the chilling account of chemical warfare by Japan. In the shadows of this massive conflict, Imperial Japan unleashed a deadly array of chemical weapons against China, leaving an indelible mark on the annals of history. Despite having a huge advantage in military weaponry, training, and equipment over China, Imperial Japan saw the deployment of chemical weapons as a quick answer to the problem of a larger number of Chinese troops compared to Japan. It's important to understand that we are not talking about using chemical weapons as a piecemeal measure, but deploying them as part of the daily tactical war offensive. Modern chemical warfare began during World War I with the use of significant quantities of toxic chemicals on a large-scale battlefield. That was made possible by the rise of the modern chemical industry at the end of the 19th century. As 1919 Nobel Prize for Chemistry winner German professor Fritz Haber said in a statement, "In no future war will the military be able to ignore poison gas, for it is a higher form of killing." Like many other European powers and the United States, Japan had an extensive chemical weapons program and was producing agents and munitions in large quantities by the late 1930s in addition to their biological work. According to Stepanov, from his book titled Chemical Weapons and Principles of Anti-Chemical Defense, Japanese units active in China included 25% chemical projectiles in the complement of artillery forces, and in the store of aviation munitions, 30% were chemical bombs. As stated by Kim Coleman in her book titled A History of Chemical Warfare, during the war against China, Imperial Japanese forces used chemical weapons in the form of shells, tear gas grenades, lacrimatory candles mixed with arsenic smoke screens, mustard gas and lewisite. A post-war survey of the reports and allegations of chemical warfare referred to the use of CN, DA, DC, phosgene, diphosgene, chloropicrin, hydrogen cyanide, mustard gas and lewisite. The weapons said to have been used included aircraft bombs, artillery shells and toxic candles. In the report by Frida Utley, a British-American wartime correspondent in China at the time, she noted her interview conversation with General Li in her book titled China at War, which says, "The greatest danger to our defense of Wuhan is gas. We haven't yet gotten gas masks, and the Japanese are now using gas constantly. Even when it is only tear or mustard gas, it lays our men out for long enough to enable the enemy to come and bayonet them as they lie gasping for breath. A few days ago, 2 whole battalions of my troops were wiped out in a gas attack." As mentioned by Rana Mitter from his book, Forgotten Ally, he has confirmed my suspicion, while conducting my own research, that the Japanese troops did use chemical weapons at the Battle of Taiyuan as well. Despite the lack of information about this particular battle with regard to the use of chemical weapons as compared to other battles, this was very clear to me, as it was Imperial Japan's chemical warfare policy against China since the very beginning of World War II, especially in situations where Japanese forces have difficulty fighting the Chinese, and that the use of what they called harassing agents can be deployed at will, as they did not require permission by Imperial General Headquarters. Japanese author Tadayoshi Murata, in his 1996 publication of Chemical Warfare of the Japanese Army, attested that the curtain opened on the war in China with the Marco Polo Bridge incident on July 7, 1937. So began Japan's foray into chemical warfare. As stated by another author, W.E. Grunden, in his book titled No Retaliation in Kind, in the 3-day battle that began on October 8, 1941, Japanese forces barraged the Chinese with gas shells for over 4 hours and dropped more than 300 gas-laden bombs on Chinese positions. And further American investigation confirmed that mustard, CN gases and lewisite have been used, although a few weeks after the Battle of Taiyuan, there was condemnation by the League of Nations on May 14, 1938, on the use of poison gas by Japan against China. There was no actual punishment for the war crimes that were committed, as stated by Herbert Bix in his book titled Hirohito and the Making of Modern Japan, despite a mountain of evidence during and after the war. In the opinion of Jeanne Guillemin, she pointed out in her publication, The 1925 Geneva Protocol, that Japan was not punished for her many war crimes due to US influence and the United States' position in the post-war era toward Japan. This topic summarized best by John W. Powell's journal title, Japan's Germ Warfare, the United States cover-up of a war crime, that not only did the United States give Japan a get-out-of-jail-free card, but both governments have succeeded in suppressing this chapter in history, and the American government's participation in illegally concealing evidence of these war crimes stemmed chiefly from Washington's desire to secure exclusive possession of what it considered to be extremely valuable military information. The Sino-American alliance during World War II was a marriage of convenience, driven by shared strategic interests and a common enemy. It is reminiscent of the formal establishment of diplomatic ties between China and the US as a strategic countermeasure against the Soviet Union in the late 1970s. The wartime alliance forced the US government to acknowledge China's strength, resilience, and the contributions it made to the Allied victory. As we can see during this two-part series, the US government's honest and positive portrayal of China during World War II stands in stark contrast to its shift in rhetoric for the decades-long demonization propaganda we are all accustomed to in the West. Western media outlets have played a substantial role in shaping public opinion towards China and frequently portray China negatively with biased and distorted narratives. This demonization campaign serves to vilify China, creating an atmosphere of fear and mistrust. These narratives reinforce the idea of China as a threat to justify more military spending and create tensions in the Pacific region for the advancement of its perpetual war policy. In 2020, the US Congress even passed the H.R. 7937 bill titled Countering CCP Malign Influence Act, which authorizes the spending of $300 million per year for spreading anti-China propaganda globally, in addition to what they have already been spending. Such policies will only lead to greater mistrust and confrontation. To fully understand China, it is essential to delve into its rich history and diverse culture. China has a unique civilization spanning thousands of years, characterized by its own philosophies, traditions, and values. Western perspectives often fail to appreciate these complexities, resulting in misinterpretations and misunderstandings. Recognizing China's historical and cultural context is crucial for fostering empathy, cooperation, and mutual respect. Understanding China is a critical imperative to prevent US-China conflict and avert the catastrophic consequences of a possible World War III. The Western media's demonization propaganda against China has created a distorted image that perpetuates fear and mistrust. It is the responsibility of the public to challenge these negative portrayals and seek a comprehensive understanding of China, its history, culture, people, and geopolitical position. By promoting empathy, cooperation, and peaceful resolution, we can mitigate the risks of conflict and work towards a more sustainable and harmonious international order and a multipolar world.